Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really plunging into something I think a lot of us have felt. It's that often messy, sometimes, frustrating, but ultimately pretty amazing journey of actually learning English in real life.
Exactly. We've looked at so many listener stories, linguistic notes.
A huge amount of material.
Yeah, and it really highlights the stuff they genuinely don't teach you in textbooks.
Right.
It's like that moment you're trying to order coffee and the barista's talking a mile a minute.
Oh, I know that feeling. Completely lost.
Yeah, it feels like they're on a totally different frequency. It's such a common thing we heard.
It reminds me, and this is super embarrassing. Early on, I thought I was using this great phrase.
Right.
I told my boss his presentation was pregnant.
Oh, no.
Instead of impressive.
Yeah.
True story. You just want the ground to swallow you up.
Wow.
But honestly, what our deep dive really shows is those moments, they stick with you. They become the best teachers, weirdly enough.
They absolutely do. And it connects to that feeling, where you theoretically have the vocabulary, the grammar rules. But someone asks you something simple, like, how's your weekend going? And your mind just goes blank.
Totally blank. And you end up just saying, good.
Right. Just repeating yourself. It can make you feel like a bit of a fraud, linguistically speaking, even after all the work you've put in.
It's so frustrating. I remember I could read English pretty well, right? Okay, even follow movies with subtitles.
Yeah.
But face-to-face with a native speaker, brain freeze. Total short circuit. And the worst part, I think, was looking at other learners who seemed to just switch languages so easily. You feel kind of alone in the struggle.
And our research really backs that up. That sense of isolation is really common, especially for intermediate learners. But honestly, every single English learner has been there.
You're right.
That gap between knowing the language in your head and actually using it smoothly in a real conversation, it's like having all the ingredients for a cake.
But not knowing how to bake it, right? Especially when things are moving fast.
Exactly. You haven't quite figured out how to put it all together under pressure.
But here's the thing. The core insight that just kept coming up in our deep dive.
Yeah.
That awkward, uncomfortable phase, it's not a bug. It's actually a feature.
That's a great way to put it.
It's literally how your brain learns to process and spit out a new language in real time. Those struggles, they're like data points for your brain.
Precisely. And we've gathered some brilliant stories today directly from listeners that I think will make you feel much less alone in this.
Good.
Plus, we want to break down some of those real-life phrases, the ones that actually matter day to day, that often get skipped in formal lessons.
Yeah, like learning that when someone asks, how are you? They usually don't want your entire medical history.
Definitely not.
I learned that the hard way. Once spent about 5 minutes explaining my mild headache to a poor cashier.
Oh, dear. Their face must have been a picture.
Utter confusion, but it perfectly illustrates a big myth our sources kept pointing to.
Which is?
This idea that you need to be perfect before you start speaking.
Oh, absolutely. That is such a pervasive myth. It's like saying you need to know how to swim perfectly before you even dip a toe in the water.
Right. It makes no sense.
It's totally counterintuitive to how we actually learn, especially languages.
It's a trap I definitely fell into. I spent so much time trying to nail the pronunciation of phrases I barely even use.
Like, how do you do?
Practice it over and over, trying to sound, sophisticated.
Right. Very formal.
And then in real life, nobody says it. It's all, what's up, or how's it going?
Yeah.
Total mismatch.
And that's a key distinction our research highlights constantly. The gap between formal textbook English and the English people actually use on the street, at work, with friends, it can be huge.
Huge.
It's like trying to learn to dance by just studying, the physics of movement instead of actually getting on the floor and feeling the music. You need the practice.
Speaking of dancing, this is another cringe one. College party. I thought I was being really smooth, and I asked this guy, shall we dance?
Okay, very Jane Austen.
Exactly. He just looked at me completely baffled and went, do you want to dance?
Direct and to the point.
So embarrassing. But honestly, it was such a perfect, if painful, lesson in register.
Register. Yeah, that's crucial.
Understanding what level of formality fits the situation, right?
Exactly. And building on your shall we dance moment, register is something that comes up again and again in learner experiences. It's not just formal versus informal. It's the subtle stuff. Word choice, tone, knowing the vibe of different circles, work, friends, online. You wouldn't text your best mate saying, "I hope this message finds you well," would you?
Definitely not. It really is like a dance, matching the rhythm of the conversation, the room.
Yeah, and you got to know the unwritten rules for each situation.
And what hit me about that party moment was it taught me more about natural English than weeks of grammar study.
Because it was real feedback.
Yes. He didn't just correct me. He showed me what people actually say. That immediate contextual feedback is gold.
It's funny how the most uncomfortable moments often teach us the most, isn't it? I had my own disaster in my first English job interview.
Oh, yeah. Do tell.
I was so nervous. They asked me to describe myself, my potential,
Oh,
and I proudly announced I was very pregnant with ideas.
pregnant with ideas. Wow.
I was aiming for brimming with ideas, you know.
I get it, but oh, wow.
My brain just smushed them together. Linguistic catastrophe.
So what happened? Did you run screaming? How did that play out?
Well, the surprising thing is, I got the job.
No way.
Yeah. The interviewer told me later that, okay, the mistake was jarring, but it made me memorable.
Ah,
And they saw I was willing to take a risk, you know, put myself out there, even if it went wrong. They saw authenticity, I guess.
that's actually kind of beautiful. Your mistake became a weird sort of strength.
Yeah.
And I think that gets to something that our deep dive shows again and again.
Yeah.
The fear of making mistakes is probably the single biggest hurdle to fluency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But embracing them is the key.
Right.
We're taught mistakes are bad, failures. But in language learning, they're just data.
Yeah. Your brain testing things out. Hypothesis testing, basically.
Exactly. It's crucial for building what linguists call your interlanguage, that system you build between your first language and English. It needs mistakes to grow.
Like when I used to say I have 25 years instead of I'm 25 years old.
A classic one.
People understood me, technically, but it just sounds off, unnatural.
Right.
And getting from just understood to sounding natural, that's a big jump for a lot of learners.
And you can only really figure out those nuances through actual talking, trying things out.
You can't just Google it.
No. Naturalness comes from tons of exposure, trying stuff, getting that feedback, even if it's just a confused look sometimes.
You know, a big shift for me was changing how I reacted to being misunderstood.
How so?
I used to take it so personally. Like if someone asked me to repeat myself or looked confused, I felt judged, like I was failing.
Oh, that's so common. We saw that feeling expressed in so many listeners' stories.
Yeah.
Like their confusion is a direct criticism of you.
Exactly. But communication is two-way, right? Sometimes it's not even about my English.
That's a really important point.
I remember ordering coffee once, asked for a large coffee with room for milk. Simple enough, I thought.
Seems clear.
Barista looked totally blank, my first thought. My English is terrible.
Right. Immediate self-blame.
Turns out, at that specific coffee shop, the phrase was, a large coffee, leave room.
Ah, their specific lingo.
Exactly. It wasn't my grammar, it was just their way of saying it. The core meaning was the same, but the preferred phrase was different. Tiny detail, big confusion.
That's a perfect illustration of how English isn't just one thing. It varies not just country to country, but community to community, workplace to workplace, even coffee shop to coffee shop.
Yeah, what's totally normal in one place is weird in another.
Context is everything.
And that leads to another big insight from the deep dive. The English you need changes. Academic English isn't workplace. English isn't hanging out with friends English.
Totally different beasts. Like in an academic paper, you might write, the quantitative data suggests a compelling correlation.
Very formal.
But at a BBQ, talking about the same thing, you'd say, looks like these things are kind of connected somehow, you know?
Much more casual, both right, but different worlds.
And navigating that is about code switching.
Right, shifting your style.
Yeah, consciously or unconsciously changing how you talk based on who you're with and where you are. For learners, it often starts with just noticing how others do it, listening carefully.
It's an advanced skill, but it starts with observation.
Definitely. It reminds me, I went to this networking event once trying way too hard to sound professional.
Oh boy, been there.
I was using all my big academic words, starting sentences with, in my considered professional opinion, or based on my extensive analysis.
Laying it on thick.
Totally. After about 10 minutes, this guy just goes, dude, relax. We're just talking about the weather.
Huh. A reality check.
Big time. It was a wake-up call. Sometimes trying too hard to sound impressive just makes you sound stiff, less authentic, less easy to connect with.
That's such a good point, and it's a theme that really resonated in the feedback we got. Authenticity matters more than perfection.
People can tell.
Yeah, they sense when you're being real versus putting on a performance. And genuine connection often follows genuine expression.
And think about how kids learn their first language
Okay.
based on acquisition theories.
Okay.
They don't worry about sounding dumb. A 3-year-old says, I go to the store, totally confidently.
True. No shame.
Their focus is 100% on getting the message across, the meaning, not the perfect grammar. But as adults, we get so hung up on the mechanics.
So self-conscious.
Yeah, that we forget. The whole point is just communication, connection.
I think for me, a real breakthrough happened when I shifted my internal question.
From what to what?
From, did I say that correctly, to, did they get what I meant? Did we actually connect? That changed everything.
That's massive. And it's something many successful learners echoed. Because language isn't a performance.
No.
It's about connecting with other humans. And when you show genuine interest, people are usually way more patient and forgiving about the odd grammatical slip.
Totally. I remember talking to my neighbor about gardening. I didn't know the word fertilizer,
Okay.
so I just said plant food.
Makes sense.
And she knew exactly what I meant. We ended up having this great chat about tomatoes, and I learned a bunch of gardening words naturally just through the conversation.
See, the genuine interest bridged the gap.
Yeah, the language barrier kind of melted away because we were both into the topic.
That's the magic of authentic conversation. The vocabulary just comes when you're engaged. It sticks better because it's tied to meaning, to emotion, to that connection.
But let's be real, there's also an emotional toll, right? We need to acknowledge that.
Oh, absolutely.
There were days I felt so dumb, so frustrated, just wanted to pack it all in.
I definitely had those days.
Yeah.
Especially when you feel like you're going backwards.
Yes. Like you have a great conversation one day,
Feel amazing.
and the next day you can barely string a sentence together. It's not linear progress, is it?
Not at all. That nonlinear feeling is super common. Our data showed that.
In our deep dive shows, that's actually normal. Progress isn't a straight line.
No.
It's more like a spiral staircase.
Ooh, I like that. Explain.
Well, sometimes you feel like you're revisiting the same issues, maybe going downward slightly, but you're actually circling up to a higher, more complex level of understanding each time you revisit something.
That's a fantastic metaphor. A spiral staircase.
Yeah.
Stealing that.
Please do.
And I think it's vital to acknowledge the vulnerability involved here.
Oh, hugely.
You're essentially rewiring how you think and express yourself.
Oh, yeah.
It's uncomfortable. You're stepping way outside your comfort zone.
Totally vulnerable. Putting yourself out there, risking mistakes, misunderstanding, even judgment sometimes.
Yeah.
But that vulnerability, it's also where the real connection happens. When it works, it feels amazing. It's the cost, but it's also the reward.
Absolutely. And honestly, to every single person listening who is learning English, based on the stories you shared, you are so much braver than you probably realize.
So true.
Every time you choose to use English, imperfectly or not, you're taking this courageous step. You're building bridges.
Speaking of courage, let's get practical. What are some strategies that actually help in real-life conversations? Things distilled from the learners who seem to navigate this best.
Okay, top tip from me.
Yeah.
Find your personal conversation starters.
Not the textbook ones.
No, forget what's the weather like, unless you genuinely care. Find something that truly interests you. For me, weirdly, it was coffee.
Coffee? How so?
I noticed people have really specific coffee orders. So I started asking, how do you take your coffee? Or what's your go-to coffee order? And it consistently opened up these great chats about morning routines, favorite local cafes, even travel memories connected to coffee. Low stakes, but high yield.
That's brilliant. So simple, but personal. Okay, my big one from my own struggles was figuring out idioms in context.
Not just memorizing lists.
No, that never worked for me. But catching one in conversation, feeling confused, and then actually asking about it. Like someone says it's raining cats and dogs. Instead of nodding and pretending, I learned to say something like, I've heard that before, but why cats and dogs? Is there a story there?
Turning confusion into curiosity. I love that.
Exactly. And usually the person was happy to explain, maybe even thought about it themselves for the first time. It made the idiom stick, and it made the conversation more interesting.
That's fantastic. Native speakers often enjoy explaining bits of their language when asked genuinely. It becomes a shared discovery.
Totally. Okay, let's talk specifics. What are some actual phrases, the conversational glue, that makes things flow better? Things you wish you'd known earlier.
Oh, transition phrases. Definitely. Things like, speaking of which, or that reminds me, or on a related note, by the way.
Ah, the little bridges.
Yeah. They stop you from just jumping randomly between topics. Makes the whole conversation feel smoother, more connected.
I used to do that, just jump. Made my conversations feel really choppy. Learning those little connectors made a huge difference in sounding more natural.
Another big one for me, and something we saw learners grapple with, is how to disagree politely.
Ooh, yes. Culturally tricky sometimes.
Very.
Yeah.
In my first language, being direct is fine, even expected. But in English, I learned you often need to soften it.
How?
Using phrases like, I see what you mean, but, or that's an interesting point, however, or I'm not sure I see it quite that way.
Right, sort of cushioning the disagreement.
Exactly. It's about keeping the conversation open, preserving social harmony, rather than just stating facts bluntly.
I learned that the hard way, too. Said you're wrong quite directly in a meeting once.
Ouch. How did that go down?
Not well. Faces dropped. Not because I was factually wrong, but the way I said it was just jarring in that context. Big lesson in tone and approach mattering just as much as the content.
Yeah. Now, you might say.
I have a slightly different perspective on that, or could we look at it this way, much less confrontational.
And it's not about being fake, right? It's about creating space for discussion, not shutting it down. It's a subtle but really powerful communication skill in English.
Definitely. And this touches on something broader, learning the cultural scripts.
Yes. English isn't just words and grammar. It's knowing how people interact in different situations. The unspoken rules.
Like small talk.
Yeah, small talk, the bane of many learners' existence.
I used to hate it. It seems so pointless.
Me too. Like, why are we talking about the weather? But then I realized it's not really about the weather.
What's it about then?
It's relationship building. It's a social lubricant. It's saying, I see you, I acknowledge you. Let's create a little moment of connection before we dive into the real reason we're talking.
Like a little warm-up.
Exactly. And usually, the expected response to, how was your weekend, isn't a minute-by-minute breakdown.
No.
Just a brief, good thanks, yours, is often enough to complete the ritual.
Okay, I definitely made that mistake. I once gave a coworker a full 15-minute saga about my weekend grocery shopping trip.
Oh, dear.
He just wanted to use the printer behind me. Learned my lesson about reading the room.
We've all been there. But you know, what our deep dive really reinforces is that people are generally more forgiving than we fear.
Especially if they sense you're trying.
Yeah. Genuine effort and goodwill, that covers a multitude of grammatical sins and even the occasional social blunder. Authenticity counts for a lot.
And here's a thought that kept crystallizing for me throughout this whole process. The goal isn't necessarily to sound exactly like a native speaker from London or New York or wherever.
What is it then?
The goal is to communicate effectively, clearly, and authentically as yourself, using English as your tool.
Yes. Beautifully put. Your accent, your perspective, your unique way of phrasing things sometimes, those aren't flaws.
No.
They're features. They make your English interesting, memorable, adds flavor.
I used to be so hung up on my accent, practiced American sounds until my jaw ached.
Trying to erase yourself.
Kind of. But then I had this amazing professor, strong German accent, but one of the most captivating speakers I've ever heard.
What made him captivating?
His ideas, his passion, his clarity. His accent was just part of him. It wasn't a barrier at all. It was just his voice made me realize clarity and substance beat perfect pronunciation any day.
Absolutely. If people understand you and you have something interesting to say,
Yeah.
the accent is just window dressing. It's your unique voice.
So speaking of clarity, let's touch on a really underrated skill.
Go on.
Something that takes you from just talking at people to actually connecting with them.
Okay, I'm hooked. What is it?
The art of checking for understanding.
Oh, yes. So crucial and something we saw effective communicators do constantly. Not just assuming people get you.
Right. Actively asking things like, does that make sense?
Or am I explaining this clearly?
Yeah. Or even, what questions do you have about that? It shows you care about the listener.
Totally. And the flip side is just as important.
When you don't understand.
Yeah. Instead of just nodding along, hoping it'll click later.
Which it usually doesn't.
Exactly. Asking clarifying questions. Could you give me an example?
Or, sorry, when you say X, what exactly do you mean?
Those phrases are like learner superpowers.
They really are. They turn that awkward confusion into a chance to learn. And often other people are confused, too.
Absolutely.
I was in a work meeting once. Someone kept saying, let's circle back on this.
Corporate jargon.
Had no clue what it meant. But I took a breath and said, sorry, I'm not familiar with that phrase. Could you explain circle back?
Good for you. What happened?
They explained it means return to discuss later. And then, like, 3 other people immediately went, oh, thanks for asking. I wasn't sure either.
See? You did everyone a favor.
It was a great moment. Realized it wasn't weak to ask. It was actually helpful.
That's an amazing story because it perfectly illustrates a key finding. Asking those questions isn't admitting weakness. It's demonstrating advanced communication skills.
How so?
It shows self-awareness, humility, and a genuine drive to understand properly. People respect that way more than someone pretending to know everything.
Yeah, I guess curiosity is more valuable than faking it.
Definitely. Our deep dive consistently showed the most successful learners, often the most curious ones, the ones least afraid to just engage, ask questions, treat every chat as a chance to learn. Not just language, but about people.
And, finding topics I was genuinely passionate about really helped too, like cooking.
Connecting it to interests.
Yeah, learning vocabulary about ingredients or techniques felt motivated, not like a chore. And that vocabulary sticks so much better because it's tied to something I enjoy.
That makes total sense. Which brings us to another important point about the long game.
Okay.
This idea of perpetual fluency. It's not like you reach a finish line and boom, you're done learning English.
No, language doesn't work like that, does it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Even native speakers are constantly learning new words, new slang, new ways of saying things. Language is alive. It keeps changing.
And your needs change too, right, throughout life.
Exactly. The English you need as a student is different from what you need as a parent, or in a new job, or when you take up a new hobby.
I really felt that when I started mentoring other English learners. Suddenly, I needed all this language for explaining things clearly, giving encouragement, offering constructive feedback.
Language you hadn't needed before.
Right. It made me realize fluency isn't some static state you achieve. It's this ongoing journey of adapting and growing your language skills as your life evolves.
That's such a healthy way to look at it. Takes the pressure off perfection, puts the focus on continuous growth and adaptation, using your life as the learning material.
Okay, before we wrap this up, let's give everyone listening something really concrete. A strategy they can try, like this week, inspired by all these insights. What's one thing?
Okay, my challenge is this. Have one genuine conversation with a stranger this week.
Not just ordering coffee.
No, something a little more open. Compliment someone's dog in the park and ask about it.
Yeah.
Ask someone reading a book what they think of it. Just open a small door for a real unplanned chat, see what happens.
I love that. Embrace the unknown interaction. Okay, my suggestion builds on something we discussed. Pay super close attention to how native speakers transition between topics.
The little bridges.
Yeah. Notice that reminds me, speaking of by the way, on that note, listen for them. And then try to consciously use just one of those phrases in your next conversation.
Nice. Small change, big impact on flow.
Exactly.
And just remember, the overarching message from everything we've looked at, the goal isn't perfection, it's connection.
Connection over correction.
Absolutely. If you connect with someone, share an idea, have a laugh, understand each other even with mistakes, that's a huge win. That's success. That's courage in action.
I really am grateful for my own messy English journey. It was hard, sure, frustrating sometimes, but the doors it opened, the people I've met, the opportunities, it changes your whole world.
It really does. And seriously, to everyone listening, based on the sheer number and depth of experiences shared with us, you are braver than you know.
Truly.
Every single time you decide to communicate in English, imperfectly or not, you're building a bridge. Between cultures, between people, you're creating possibility.
And your journey is yours alone, right? Don't compare your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20.
Exactly. You're exactly where you need to be on your path.
So the final thought is maybe just keep going.
Keep speaking, keep connecting, and keep being courageously imperfect.